Hi, I'm Akesa. Welcome to the Lady Shine Show.
Hi guys, welcome again. So today we are going to conclude Jolan Silvera's case. As you all may be aware of, his sentencing was a couple days ago on March 6th, and he was sentenced to 20 years and 10 months in prison, and he will be eligible for parole after he serves 13 years. The judge presiding over his case was Judge Brian Sykes. Now, during the sentencing, the judge went over all that happened since the day Melissa Silvera was murdered by her husband, Jolan Silvera, and he gave a overview of everything that was discussed in court from the prosecution and from the defense side. Jolan Silvera was ultimately charged with her murder after ballistics showed that it was his weapon that was used to murder Miss Silvera. Initially, it was reported that Miss Silvera died of natural causes in her sleep. Yep, that was what was reported initially. Now, the judge had some words for Mr. Silvera. He felt as though Mr. Silvera only pled guilty to manslaughter because he felt like he was basically between a rock and a hard place. He didn't feel like it was from him feeling some type of way about the murder or he felt bad. It was a way to save himself and not through remorse. Hence the reason why the judge didn't dwell into the defense leniency that they were seeking. The judge also noted that it was actually voluntary manslaughter. It wasn't involuntary. Mrs. Silvera basically wrote a note to the court stating exactly or what he said happened that night. So apparently they had an argument over something. Whenever they argued, Mr. Silvera, would go over to his sister's house. He would basically, like Jamaicans would have say, "I'm gonna go walk out and just leave this thing be." He said that particular night he and her had an argument and he was going to go over to his sister, and she started saying some lewd things to him like he should stop F his sister. She was being very disrespectful, and she talked about, the children. He said what initially triggered him is the fact that she said she blamed him for the death of their son. I mentioned this in part one, how their son died. Y'all could go back and watch that video. But she blamed him for that. And then she said, "Oh, why don't you drown the other kids like you did?" Something to that sort. And that triggered him, and he pulled out his gun and he pew-pewed her. Those were his words. Anyways, he then left the house, and the kids called him. He came back, called the police, and everything started from there. Now, the judge was a little annoyed with the fact that the kids had to go through this. He said he lied basically because he wanted to protect his children because they lost their mom and he didn't want them to lose their father. Like Mr. Silvera, who's the reason for that? You're the reason why they lost their mom. Who was well anyways, guys. So the judge thought he spoke about the children being in that situation, finding their mom, and all these things. He spoke about the police that came um to identify Mrs. Silvera before she went to the morgue. Mr. Silvera initially did not want an autopsy done, which the judge said that's fine if he wanted to do his own thing to an extent, but again, it wasn't because he cared or because he didn't want this. It was because he was trying to cover himself, and that is why he pled guilty to manslaughter. Yeah, the lawyers, they tried to do, they tried to put up a fight, his lawyers, but they could not win. Um, and I know a lot of Jamaicans, they're upset because they don't feel like justice was served. Me personally, I think some justice was served, because when you're from a certain stature, like you have to expect the unexpected. And I thought he was probably gonna get what his team um was asking for, or even less. I thought that justice would not have been given to Miss Silvera to the extent it was given. Now, we all know that he cannot get a mandatory life sentence because, again, you have to work with the law. He plead guilty to manslaughter. Manslaughter carry a sentence from about 5 to 25 years. Now he couldn't. The judge didn't give him the maximum, and I believe it's because of his previous criminal record, which was very much clean. He never had a criminal record. There was nothing prior to this that would say, okay, you've been a troublemaker, you've been this type of person, and this is the outcome. I think the judge used that to his discretion, but at the same time, the judge was not very much lenient. And I personally believe the judge did the best he could with the information that was given to the court. And I think that it was fair on a legal basis. Now, as it relates to Mr. Silvera, I felt like he should have rot in prison. And I'm sorry I'm saying that, but that's how I personally feel, because you came in the court. They said a dead person cannot defend themselves. Now we know that couples argue all the time, and words are going to, spew, and it may not be nice, it may not be clean, but the dead cannot defend themselves. So we do not know if what he's saying was true, because we already know you lied before, Mr. Silvera. You lied before to cover yourself. Now, who knows if you lied on that woman in court? You have people saying that, yes, she may talk a certain type of way, but did she deserve to die the way she did? On top of that, Mr. Silvera remodeled the bedroom. He cleaned it up. The man literally set a scene with his dead wife's body. One of the children said when he came back, after they found her with blood coming out of her mouth or her face and her nostrils, he pretended to talk to her. That's how heinous that crime was. Anyways, guys, Mrs. Silvera was sentenced to 20 years and 10 months for using a firearm to carry out the murder, and he also received 20 years for the murder. He will be serving both concurrently, meaning at the same time. And whenever you get to sentencing, you spend the longer sentence, hence the reason why he's sentenced to the 20 years and 10 months. And like I said, after 13 years, he will be eligible for parole. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope to see you in the next video. May Miss Silvera rest peacefully, and may her family find peace now. Take care. Bye.